Let's talk about the true NKOTB here, Brian. And if you're a boy of the 80s, if you're a man of the 80s, you know that's a new kid on the block.
Mm-hmm. I have
So
no idea what you're talking about.
yeah, you did. So so anyway, Chris O'Leary is by far the new kid on the block. Even though Marcus Freeman is also coming in new to the staff. Chris O'Leary, this is his first Division I coaching job as far as a full-time positional coach. And so there's a lot of question marks when it comes to Chris O'Leary. I mean, we could do a whole podcast just on him and why this is a big season for him. I mean, he's joining a staff who has a proven track record, and Chris O'Leary has no Division I track record at this point. And so we're kind of, really digging deep into his past to try to figure out, okay, what kind of coach do we think he can be? And maybe more importantly, what kind of recruiter can Chris O'Leary be? And those are the kind of the big question marks coming in.
Yeah, because there's nothing but question marks.
Right.
I mean, look, it's like with anything. It's fine that you're a really good analyst or you're a really good graduate assistant, but there's a whole different level of pressure on you when you're the guy. And it's the same thing. Like I've talked about this, a quarterback. I've seen in the NFL my entire life, I've seen mistake after mistake after mistake of NFL teams throwing a lot of money at some backup quarterback who came off the bench for 2, 3, 4 games. Sometimes even almost a full season, like Matt Castle back in the day. And you're like, hey, there's a reason this guy was a backup quarterback. Rarely do you see a backup quarterback who wasn't drafted to be the heir apparent. I'm not talking about like an Aaron Rodgers who was drafted to be the heir apparent. And so, yes, he was a backup quarterback. That's not what we're talking about.
Right.
We're talking about those backup quarterbacks that signed free agent deals with other teams. And, I think like of Scott Mitchell when
Nick
the line. Yeah. Well, it's like when the Lions signed Scott Mitchell, Nick Foles. I mean, Matt Castle, we've seen it time and again where they throw all this money at this backup quarterback and they're like, wow, I can't believe he's not better than this. Like there's no pressure on a backup quarterback to come off the bench for 3 games. Like, there's no pressure on him. It's completely different than being the guy. And so, to me, that applies here with Chris O'Leary is we don't know how he's going to perform now that he is the guy, now that there is pressure on him. If an analyst, there's just a different level of pressure.
It is.
And we don't need to dive too much into what, examples, but it's just a different level of pressure. So this is going to be an opportunity for him to show that he can handle it. And there's a different level of pressure. But I mean, he's been a full-time position coach before, but look, I coached Division I AA, and I can assure you that the level of pressure on me at Duquesne would have been a whole lot different than it would have been had I been the receivers coach at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And so it's just different. It's new, and we're going to find out if he has the chops for it. I don't know a thing about Chris O'Leary specifically, like meaning having observed him, having spoken to him. Yeah. I've done none of those things. All I can do is rely on the opinions of people that I know and trust who have some experiences with him. And so far, everything I've heard about him is great. I mean, there's reasons to be excited about it. Hard worker, grinder, relates well to the kids, commands respect, which is, as you know, Vince, is the hardest thing to do,
especially
as a young coach when you're barely 3, 4, 5 years older than a lot of these guys, is to command their respect. It's easy to be cool. Hey, we listen to the same music. We like the same movies. We think the same girls are hot, whatever the case may be. It's easy to become like that. I've used like the friend zone as a coach, right?
Yeah, right.
But the hardest thing to do for a young coach is to still have that to a degree, but then also to command respect. And trust me, I've been there. That's a challenge. And so for Chris O'Leary, one of the things that was one of the first things I was curious to hear about. And I never asked about it because I wanted to see what people said organically, just naturally in their opinion. And every time I heard that, it was he's well respected. I kept hearing the word respected, not liked. Like I heard about, Notre Dame made a hire recently where everybody on the team likes him. Oh, I don't care if anybody likes him. I don't care if players like a coach or not. I care the players respect the coach.
Absolutely.
And so what I kept hearing, the word that kept being used without me asking about it with Chris O'Leary was respect, over and over again. The players respect him. They really respect his work ethic. They respect his this. They respect his that.
Yeah.
And the fact that people were telling me that instead of like was important for me. Was huge for me. And it may seem like a semantic thing to people listening, but for me as a coach, that is the most important word I got to hear.
Yeah.
If you and I talk about a coach for 5 minutes and the word respect never comes up in regards to his relationship with the players, then it tells me I don't know if this is a guy that's going to be able to get it done at a high level. With Chris O'Leary, that word kept coming up over and over again. And that's so important. And that makes me think there's hope that he's going to make a fast transition because, it's different than the conversation about Tommy Rees. Because when I was not pleased that Tommy Rees was hired as the offensive coordinator, to me, being a coordinator or a head coach requires a level of experience that cannot be replicated with talent or intelligence. You don't know how to handle certain situations until you've experienced handling that situation.
Right.
For me, it's a little different as an assistant coach because I think as an assistant coach, if you have the chops, you have the chops. And so that's why I think you can see a coach go from 1AA to Division I as an assistant and thrive because there are certain things that transition regardless of level.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's a lot easier for a young guy like Chris O'Leary to step in and make a really fast transition as a position coach than it is for a guy like Tommy Rees to make that transition as a young guy as a coordinator.
Yeah, yeah.
Because in a lot of ways, as an assistant coach, Marcus Freeman's telling Chris O'Leary what to do.
Sure.
Here's our practice plan for today. Here's the drills that we're going to be working on.
Right.
Here's the emphasis of what we're doing this week. Go do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? As opposed to a coordinator has to be the one to determine what the practice plan is going to be, what our focus is going to be.
It's a big difference. It's a big difference.
Right. So that's why I think that my stance on the Chris O'Leary hire is going to be different because I never had an issue with Tommy Rees being hired as a quarterbacks coach. I praised that move. I thought it was a good move. I think Tommy Rees is a potential star coach in the making. But it's just as a coordinator, it's a different animal.
Yeah.
And so, that's what you need to think about it. But I think everything I've heard about Chris O'Leary is positive, but now he's got to do it. Now he's got to show it because that's one of the thing that I guess if there was a concern that I have, Vince, it's a young, unproven coach stepping into a position with a lot of unproven players.
Right.
Outside of Kyle Hamilton, there's not a single proven player at safety.
Yeah, you're right.
We've talked a lot about Houston Griffith and his talent and how important he is to the defense, but he's got to prove it.
Yeah.
Right. And after him, it's like, I don't know what else is there. So now you're throwing a first-year coach into that. And I don't mean first-year coach meaning like first year at Notre Dame. I mean, you're talking about a first-year Division I position coach.
At Division I, yeah. Right.
And so that's a lot of pressure on him. It's not like, like if you'd have thrown a young offense or young cornerbacks coach, into Notre Dame in 2018 when he's got Julian Love and Troy Pride as veterans, you say, you can make that transition. You got some dudes that know what they're doing. Just leave them alone and, and don't screw them up, But now it's like you got to develop guys.
Yeah.
And so it's certainly a lot of pressure on Chris O'Leary, and how well he makes that transition is going to have a big say in how good this defense is going to be. Because if he struggles, Mike Mickens can take over. You can have Marcus Freeman, but then now you're taking those guys away from their duties and responsibilities. And so, yes, it may help overcome safety, but does it hurt you at other positions? And so that's why it's important for Chris O'Leary to make the fast transition, to command that respect and hit the ground running, because I'd say probably more than any other position coach, his position has the most to prove this year. Him and Mike Mickens, their positions have the most to prove, but I would argue that Chris O'Leary plays a position that's even more important, because if your corners struggle, you can protect them with the safeties. If the safeties struggle, the only thing that can protect them is the goal line, is the
end zone. That's right. I was just going to say that. Yeah, and the field judge, the back judge, isn't going to be helping you out swatting down balls. So.
Right. So it's a difference. And so if you're struggling at both, you're just not going to be a good defense.
Yeah.
And so the talent is there for Chris O'Leary. It's a very small margin for error on the depth chart. You can't afford that. To me, I don't know if there is a Clarence Lewis at safety that can step in if Houston Griffith gets hurt or doesn't pan out. There just isn't, in my opinion. And so he doesn't have the depth of talent that Mike Mickens has to choose from to work with either. There's a big talent difference between the first two guys and the other veterans coming back. Now there's some good freshmen coming in, Well, I don't know if Kerry G and Justin Walters are a guy you ideally want playing as freshmen at safety. But if they have to, you make it work. But to me, there is no Cam Hart at safety. There is no Ramon Henderson and Ryan Barnes and Philip Riley,
a bunch of talent just sitting there waiting. They're unproven, but they're just sitting there waiting. Right. Yeah, I agree.
I don't think that's the case at safety after Houston Griffith and Kyle Hamilton. So it only adds to his pressure. So I'll say this: if the Notre Dame safeties play well this year, Chris O'Leary is going to quickly become a big name in amongst young coaches, and because that's just the nature of being at Notre Dame.
Yeah,
and the other part to obviously Vince is recruiting, because not only is he thrust into a situation where he's got to prove it on the field, this is a huge year for Notre Dame recruiting safeties.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the depth chart.
Yeah.
Big year, no doubt about it.
So that's the other piece of it is, okay, can he do that and then hit the ground running in recruiting? Because at Notre Dame, you have to have both. You can't afford at Notre Dame to have a coach who can only recruit, can't coach, or a guy that can only coach but can't recruit. At Notre Dame, probably more than any big-time program, you need all 10 of your assistant coaches to be able to recruit and coach at a high level
because you're a nationwide recruiting.
Right.
I mean, worldwide, if you count, Alexander Ahrensberger, but like you have more ground to cover. This isn't like the 10 coaches at Cincinnati that are really only covering the Midwest, right? I mean, that's easier. You can, hey, why don't you sit this one out? You know what I mean? You can do some of that, but when you've got so much territory to cover
and the pool is smaller.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the other thing is, if you could cover the entire country and you can get anybody with a pulse in the school, then it's pretty easy to recruit at Notre Dame. Look,
good point.
Recruiting at Notre Dame, the admissions is not as tough as people make it out to be. Brian Kelly sets arbitrary standards, in my opinion, from things I've been told about who they will and won't take for different reasons. So, your pool is smaller. It is. That's okay. It was smaller under Lou Holtz, but are you able to get those best of the best from that smaller pool is the key here. And then the other part of it too is, Vince, is when you look at recruiting at Notre Dame can't just run kids out of the program. I mean, people say, well, why can't Notre Dame bring in 25 kids a year? Because they can't chase kids off like SEC schools who are, I believe, still working under 1-year scholarship agreements.
Yep.
Notre Dame, when a kid comes to Notre Dame, he's on a 4-year scholarship. And the only thing that can get him off the program is he chooses to leave or he does a significant rules violation. They can't chase you out of the program just because you're not good.
Because you're not talented. Yeah, right.
Right. Or you didn't pan out, and so your margin for error when you make a mistake as a recruiter is much smaller, because you can't just choose to gray shirt a guy or say, hey, look, you're gonna have to transfer because we're not honoring your scholarship next year.
Right.
And so
not how it works.
Right. So again, you got to be good at both, and then you got to develop those players. So we're going to find out right away. Chris O'Leary, you kind of like Tommy Reese stepped into the O coordinator situation at the right time. You had a 3-year starter quarterback, you had all these veteran offensive linemen, you had all these veteran players. Chris O'Leary is being thrown into the deep end, with no flotation device and weights tied around his ankles. It's like, all right, good luck, buddy. But if he's able to make it through and thrive, number one, it's going to look great for Brian Kelly and Marcus Freeman for taking a chance on this kid. I'm like, Kerry Cooks is right there. Why not hire Kerry Cooks? That's who I would have hired, from what I know. And I think Kerry Cooks would have done a great job, but they went with a young, unproven guy. So if it works, boy, what a genius you are. If it doesn't,
no kidding,
you're an idiot. Like, why would you not hire a more proven coach? I mean, that's just the nature of how these things go, right?
No, I love it. That's great. Yeah.
So, why would you hire a 13-year-old to coach your safeties? It's like, what are you doing here? But if it works, it makes you look like you're wicked smart and you know what you're doing. Right. And hopefully for Notre Dame, it works. And like I said, for everything I've heard about Chris O'Leary's great things, but now he's got to prove it. He's got to prove that he can do it as the guy.
Right.
So I mean, I don't know if we'll learn a whole lot through the spring.
I think
we're going to have a good idea when we enter November, what kind of job Chris O'Leary is doing, just not only just from a coaching standpoint, but also a recruiting standpoint.